Today we're going to do the power ranking for the Chinese and the Americas League. Now the reason that I'm doing it like this, where we'll do Americas and China today and we'll do EMEA and Pacific tomorrow, is because that's how I'll be doing it throughout the season. Some of you might remember for last year, about every couple weeks or so, 2 to 3 weeks, I would update my power rankings based off what we had seen. So this is the preseason power ranking, and then as the season goes on, we'll keep doing this with Americas and China for one video and EMEA Pacific with their own. But let's dive into it, and let's start with Chinese Valorant. Now let's be real here, obviously the Chinese league is new, a lot of the teams have made roster changes, which makes it difficult to really know, where these teams really fit. So of all of the leagues, of course, this is probably going to be the one that I get the most wrong, and will be funny to look back upon. With that said, I think it's easiest for the Chinese league to start at the top, because obviously EDG, I think, have to be the kings of China. In fact, it actually almost seems like when EDG play against other Chinese teams, they have almost a bit of a mental block where even if that team looks like they should be able to beat EDG in that game, something happens where they just can't, and there's some kind of force field that stops other Chinese teams from being able to beat them. So of course they have to go at the top. Second place as well, I think, is pretty easy because FPX, I think, are a team that, has consistently been up there towards the top of the Chinese league and are doing pretty well overall. And they've, had some changes and whatnot, but still look like a very solid team. And I would expect them, and I think most people expect them to be up there. Now, in third place is where you might start to get some disagreement, and a lot of people will put JDG there, who are the team that picked up Rare Atom, who are a very good team, but didn't quite win Ascension. But I'm going to put Trace in third place. Now, Trace, again, this isn't anything crazy or whatever. Trace, I think, is another team that people expect to be pretty good, and so far, in terms of what they've shown in some of those tournaments, they were pretty good. And for instance, when they played against Rare Atom, they were very close games, going to overtime and stuff like that. So it's not like there was a massive gap, a gulf difference between those kind of teams. And so I would expect Trace to be up there and doing pretty well. But this is where I might get a bit frisky, because you're probably expecting me to put JDG in fourth now, but no, I'm going to put BLG in fourth. And this one I think people might give me some pushback on, because BLG as a team, obviously you might recognize BLG. They were the team that beat NRG. And of course you might think, well, they've got to be good, right? They've got to be up there. But the thing is, BLG, after the kind of champs run that they went on, actually struggled quite a bit in some of those Chinese tournaments that we saw during the earlier part of the off-season. And so a lot of people, are kind of down on BLG right now. And in fact, they've actually made a roster move as well. The thing is, for BLG, I've seen it. I have seen them beat NRG, who are a good team. And to me, it wasn't even the first time that they beat NRG that impressed me, really. With the YZ judge and whatever. Sure, that was fun. But what was really, to me, impressive was the second time they played against NRG. They just looked like the better team. And that's not something you can really say for a lot of these other teams, other than maybe EDG, that, we just haven't seen them play against, teams from other regions and have success. Whereas BLG are one team that can claim that. And I don't know why, but that's just giving me this feeling of like, I just have a bit more trust that even if they were struggling, they can maybe find their way out of it. Now, in fifth place, I will put JDG. I'm not going to go crazy or anything. I think that these three teams, maybe even FPX as well, these four teams will be pretty close and maybe mix and match and whatever in terms of how we might see. I think, in terms of who might go for China, a lot of people will pick EDG, and they're probably one of these four teams. Moving down the list a bit more, we're going to put in TEC, which is RB's team, is probably how most of you will recognize them and whatever. And they're a bit of an odd team. Am I putting them there because, I know RB is good, and therefore, surely that will carry them to some sort of success? Yeah, that's part of it, especially considering there are so many unknowns in the Chinese league. Having a familiar face that is very good helps me have some confidence that they can do okay. But not just that, beforehand, when they were playing in, like, the most recent Chinese off-season tournament, for instance, they did finish in, I think, like, 5th, 6th as well, losing to Trace Esports. So, this feels like it probably should be about where you think they should maybe finish. In 7th place, I'm going to put our Ascension team, Dragon Ranger Gaming, with their Star Sentinel player, Vokashu, who, according to Ryan, at least, doesn't speak a lick of Chinese, and just has to kind of figure it out. But he is a very good player, and will be playing for this team. Obviously, they won Ascension. They managed to beat Rare Atom, who, a lot of people rated pretty highly, so they have to be at least somewhat decent to have won that game, right? And to have won Ascension. And, I think that they will probably be okay. I think like a lot of the Ascension teams, to be honest, they'll probably be, okay, but maybe not, at the very top or the very bottom, just kind of a middle of the pack team. And then we come to the bottom 4, and this is where it starts to get tough. A lot of these rosters maybe don't look so great. We'll get to Wolves in a second, but I'm actually going to put Tai Lu in 8th. I'm going to put Nova in 9th, and I'm going to put All Gamers in 10th. And Wolves are going to get left off the list at 11th. Now, is this where Wolves should be ranked? No, probably not. Their roster is probably better than all of these other 3 teams that I just put in 8th, 9th, 10th. The reason that I'm putting Wolves in 11th, though, is really for a couple of reasons. One, it will annoy Ryan Central, who's kind of, become somewhat of a more of an expert on the Chinese league, watched a lot of the Chinese games, has more knowledge about these rosters and what's really going on, and so, thinks that Wolves will be better than a lot of those teams as well. So probably that will be the case. But there's other reasons as well. Another reason is that Wolves used to be a part of Staffordshire, which is the county that I live in, but now has decided to leave and become a part of the metropolitan county of West Midlands, which basically just means that, Birmingham just took Wolves with them, essentially, when that county was created. So I consider Wolves to be kind of turncoats to their history and whatnot, and so that's another reason going against them. And then the final reason is just how people from that part of the country talk. If you don't know, this is what they sound like.
And if you're going to get out in the night, if you was want to go on the toilet, if it was 6 foot of snow, you're going to walk through it.
Up the yard, the back of the house.
And so for those reasons specifically, that's why Wolves will be going in last. And so here is my overall first pre-season Chinese tier list rankings. I'm sure that this one will change a lot. Now, though, let's move to Americas. And here's the thing. I think for Americas, we'll do it the opposite way around. We'll start from the bottom and we will go up. And this one's going to be interesting. Now, in 11th place, I kind of struggled with some of these bottom teams as well. But I'm going to stick MIBR, I think, in 11th place. And they're going to stay off the list for now. I do have some kind of thoughts that maybe the addition of Fraud and the coaching staff, will help them. And probably will mean that they, could exceed my expectations. But I'm just going to need to see it from this roster first before I really, buy into MIBR. In 10th place, I'm going to put Furia because I think that Furia, I'm just struggling right now to see it with them, to be honest. I just don't trust them to do all that well, I'll be honest. And I know that MW obviously can drop, a ton of kills on a map and getting him back on Jet and whatever. Maybe he could go crazy, but I'm not convinced by the rest of the roster. I'm just not convinced that this project will go all that well. In 9th place, we're going to put EG. Obviously, EG, I think, will be, towards the bottom of most people's lists. Obviously, they have assembled a roster that, I think can compete. And that's why, I'm not putting them at the very bottom or whatever. I do think it's a competitive roster, but I'm not expecting the world. And so I'm still not expecting great things for them. In 8th place, I'm going to put Crew. I do think Crew, obviously, having gone on their miracle run, obviously they had a bizarre year last year, but I do like some of the changes that they made. I think they'll be better than they were last year. I wouldn't be shocked if Crew, snuck a little higher on this list, when all things were said and done. But I still, have big questions. I still think that, not that their run in LCQ was a fluke or whatever, but, we saw a lot of bad play from Crew, and at Champs they weren't really that great either. So I'm still, I still definitely have questions, even if I do like some of the changes they've made. In 7th place, I'm going to put 100 Thieves. And the thing, of course, with 100 Thieves is that they got a very difficult group in the tournament, of course, the kickoff tournament. So I think the expectations are just quite low for them in general right now because no one expects them to do well in that group. Maybe if they got an easier group, people would be more high on 100 Thieves in general just because of that fact, right? But I do think that early on in the season, they haven't had a ton of time with Boostio, and we'll see how that goes, with a new IGL and whatever. And there's just, I think, some doubts. Right, where once, Astra and Bang were maybe the future of NA Valorant, maybe now there is some doubts about, how far can they really go? How good will those players actually be on the biggest stage? It's tough to really tell. So I feel like 7th is a fine position for 100 Thieves. In 6th place, I'm going to put Cloud9. Now, I think that 100 Thieves, Cloud9 are pretty close. I don't really, if you wanted to put 100 Thieves above Cloud9, I wouldn't really mind that much. I think both teams are going to be pretty close. In the offseason, we have seen some good things from Cloud9. I don't want to read into the offseason too much overall, but I feel like, with the team that they've got and the way that, kind of Vanity and the way that they maybe approach the game, I could see them, cooking up some stuff as well for this kickoff tournament, maybe surprising a couple people as well. We saw obviously the Yoru Rays Sunset stuff as well looked pretty good from Cloud9 from what we saw. So I do have some hope for this team, but I wouldn't be shocked either if they were a little lower than this, maybe even a little higher as well. In 5th place, and I can already hear you all pushing your caps locks buttons and ready to type a comment, I'm going to put Sentinels. Now, the reason that I'm going to put Sentinels here, and I know that a lot of people will have them much higher, and, you'll be saying, but they look so good in all these off-season tournaments. Well, so did 100 Thieves. 100 Thieves last year, they won Red Bull home ground. Everyone thought, wow, they're going to be amazing. They added Cryo. It's all going to go great. 100 Thieves. A lot of people had them being Fnatic at lock-in. And I'm not saying that Sentinels will suffer the same fate necessarily, but I'm just looking at the names that they have on their roster. And when I look at those names on a roster, I'm thinking there's a lot of good players here. I wouldn't necessarily call it a great roster. I think I would call it a good roster. Okay, Zekken obviously has insane potential, but outside of Zekken, like, who's carrying a map? If Zekken has a quiet map, who's carrying a map for this team? A lot of you, of course, will say TenZ, but of course he's going to be playing in a non-duelist role probably for the most part. And I don't know if TenZ on a non-duelist role will be fulfilling that destiny, right? Sassy is more of a kind of supportive player. Xelsis maybe could do it every so often, but again, I don't think that's his strong suit or the expectation. And then John Jirai GL as well. So to me, I'm looking at like a team that, like, if Zekken is not having a great map, that they could struggle in some of these maps. In 4th place, though, I'm going to put G2. And a lot of you will be saying, well, what you just said about Sentinels, can't you say about G2 as well? And maybe that's fair, honestly. And I think that, again, I'm ranking these two teams next to each other because I do think they're in that similar sort of category, right? And so I think that particularly early on in the season, right, when you've got 4 players who know exactly what they're going to do and they know each other better probably than anyone else in Valorant, and then you've got, add on to that, a superstar player, I think that that's the makings of a pretty good team. And again, I don't think the gap to like a Sentinels is like that big. You could easily swap those teams, and I wouldn't really mind that much, to be honest. But I do think that G2, and obviously G2 in the kickoff tournament as well, have an easier group, so it's more likely they end up looking better earlier on. Yeah, I think that G2 just look pretty good and will be pretty good. In 3rd place, I'm gonna put Leviathan. Here's the thing with Leviathan. I still have some questions about Leviathan, right? Obviously, the roster on paper, if we do kind of what I said about Sentinels, you look at that roster on paper, it's like, whoa, this looks pretty good. I think it might take Leviathan maybe a bit of time, to be honest, to, find their feet and find, who they are and what works for them, because it's such like a mismatch of, bunch of different players and people. But obviously, they do have a very good team, so that's why I'm still, putting them up there. But I wouldn't be shocked if they had a Team Liquid type performance at the kickoff tournament. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if that happened to Leviathan here either, right? They're in a very difficult group. I think they could honestly go out, maybe without even winning a game, and it wouldn't shock me. I still think that they would end up being pretty good, but there's a serious concern, I think, for Leviathan that, what if this experiment doesn't go that well, or there is problems, particularly early on, and they, learn to overcome that as the season goes on. Okay, and then we come to 1st and 2nd, and here's the thing. I'm going to put NRG in 2nd, and I'm going to put Loud 1st. And I know that most of you are going to call me an NA hater for putting NRG in 2nd and putting Loud 1st, and you're going to say, how can you put Loud 1st when they've lost Aspas, right? How does that make any sense? And we'll get into Loud in a second, but first let's talk about NRG, because again, with NRG, similar to Leviathan, I do have some questions, right? Cypher is really strong right now. Who's playing Cypher for this team? And I do also have questions, Ethan's IGLing for the first time in Valorant, right? How will that go? I don't know. And it probably will go pretty well. I'm still putting them in 2nd, so I'm still expecting them to be very good, of course, but I do still think there is some questions. And again, like Leviathan, that it might take them a bit longer than people first realize or recognize. And I've put Loud in 1st, and again, you might be saying, like, they've lost Aspas, and QCK, whilst a good player, is no Aspas, so how can you put them in 1st? The thing is, for me, with Loud, is I just trust Sadak. I just trust Sadak. There were similar concerns for Loud coming into last year as well, right? That they'd lost Sassy and Pancada, you're replacing them with 2, like, young, unknown Brazilian players, like, I don't know, Chief, like, I don't know if that's gonna work, right? That's what we were all saying about Loud coming into lock-in too. But they were good. And I just trust Sadek. There's literally just nothing else to it. I trust him in terms of coming up with some interesting ideas in a meta like this that maybe is a bit more open. I trust him for that. I trust him that the team will know what they're doing. And I think that they will just be pretty good. So there is my full Americas tier list as well. As I said, we'll be doing EMEA and Pacific tomorrow. And then we'll do the pick'ems as well for all of the 4 regions. And then we'll be watching Tier 1 Valorant. Isn't that crazy? We've waited God knows how long to see meaningful games at Tier 1, but it's finally happening this week.